that the water expert group have prepared. And then we will also present some key messages that we have developed and that will be discussed in the panel today. Next slide, please. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page where we are in the process, as many of you might know, in May, the expert presented their first list of indicators where they had narrowed it down from more than 9,000 indicators to 490. Then in June, they met for a mandated workshop where parties and experts met to discuss these indicators. During the SP62 session in Bonn, the parties agreed to a new mandate for the experts to further refine the indicators, which the experts did over the summer. They met in Nairobi to agree on common methodologies and approaches to the indicators, to then in September present the final list of potential indicators, that is 100, to the parties. The parties met in October to prepare for the negotiations taking place here now in Belém. Next slide, please. So just to remember what we are dealing with here with the water and sanitation target, which is the focus of our session here today. It says to significantly reducing climate-induced water scarcity and enhancing climate resilience to water-related hazards towards a climate-resilient water supply, climate-resilient sanitation, and towards access to safe and affordable potable water for all. So what the water group have done, next slide please, in terms of presenting indicators for this target is that they have prepared 10 indicators. The first one being about change in water stress levels over time. The second one, change in water use efficiency over time. The third, proportion of critical water and sanitation infrastructure systems that are built and retrofitted to withstand climate-related hazards. Third, proportion of total areas of basins for which a climate adaptation plan is developed and implemented as part of an integrated water resource management approach. Fifth, proportion of population using drinking water services that are safely managed and climate resilient. Proportion of population using sanitation services that are safely managed and climate resilient. Proportion of parties taking measures to improve and extend wash services to population disproportionately affected by climate change and to vulnerable groups. Proportion of bodies with good ambient water quality. Percentage of people assisted with a planned relocation as a result of water-related hazards and extreme events, and number of parties that integrate climate adaptation measures into their national plans for water resources management and water supply and sanitation plans. Next slide, please. So the water sector, the community that is behind this day here today, we are very happy with these indicators because we think that they strike a good balance of the different components, including reducing water scarcity, water-related hazards, or responding to water-related hazards for water and sanitation and hygiene services, and so on. We also think there's a good balance between outcome indicators, including water stress, and process indicators, including integrated water resources management, international adaptation plans, which is important for tracking process across times and different levels. We also like that it has included the transboundary dimension and disaggregation, because of course it is vital for dealing with the climate vulnerabilities in a coherent way. We also like the comprehensive approach suggested. We only have 100 indicators in this framework, which of course is very little. But to make sure that we're actually meeting the aims of the GJA, we need to make sure that the indicators are systematically disaggregated and integrated across the thematic and policy targets to enable implementation support for the thematic targets, including the inclusion of traditionally marginalized groups, but also that the thematic perspectives inform the policy cycle. Next slide, please. And speaking about these integrated approaches, we have also looked into how much the different targets cross-reference each other. And we were really happy to see that the water is recognized as a catalyst for the other targets as well, with 54% of them recognizing water and sanitation as important for their fulfillment. And actually all the water and sanitation targets refer to other targets in their indicators as well. And if we go to the next slide, please. Here are just some of the examples for how they do that. For instance, the Food and Agriculture Group refer to water quality as important for food and agriculture production. The Health Group refer to water for prevention of disease spread. Infrastructure Group speak about transboundary climate risks expressed in water and the need to respond to that. And Impact, Vulnerability and Risk Assessment Group say that it's important to have climate risk data for water with disaggregation for the transboundary level. Next slide, please. So, and I must confess, I wasn't in the negotiations yesterday, so I don't know if this is the latest update of where we are. But just some of the discussion points that are expressed in the negotiation room right now is, of course, should the indicators be adopted as they are? Should they be welcomed? Should there be another 2-year work program to refine the indicators? Seems very much in the air in that regard from the parties. Also, what should be the COP30 process and reporting? How should it fit into the biannual transparency report and the global stocktake too? A very big discussion point, of course, is also means of implementation and wider enablers. That is something that has been really difficult for the parties to move forward on, and where also the experts actually provided different options in their proposed list of indicators. There's also some parties calling for including a goal of tripling adaptation finance into the GDA negotiations, which other parties are against. Transboundary dimensions is also an issue that divides a little bit between the parties. And when it comes to the water and sanitation indicators, there's also been questions about, or hesitations or misunderstandings about the climate rationale for the different water indicators. And our response as the Water and Sanitation Group, or what we think should be the next steps moving forward in our key messages, is something that we will present now and that my dear colleague Manu will come up on stage to present.
Thank you very much, Tuve, and of course, primarily a thank you to the working group of achieving the global goal on adaptation under the Water for Climate Pavilion, who has worked hard to come forward with this key message, and would like to express a special thank you to Tuve and Jose, who have worked tirelessly across 2 years now with the pavilion also, and of course very much longer, to put forward these key messages and provide really a foundation for us all to go forward and try our best to influence the negotiations. And I know that particularly the documents with the key messages has been shared widely. So I will have now the grateful task of going through these key messages, not only to, of course, give you a foundation for what we're arguing, but also to inform our panel, as we're not only discussing the importance of a cross-sectoral and really holistic set of indicators, but also to really refine our advocacy messages and what we're trying to aim for. So today we're going to cover the key messages around 5 areas, and the first one will be the number of the indicators in the agreed GGA framework. The second one will be the climate rationale for the water and sanitation indicators. The third one will deal with the transboundary dimensions to the indicators of the GGA framework. We will then also go into the integration across thematic, dimensional, and means of implementation indicators, as well as the role of the custodian agencies and thematic stakeholders. So if we then really dive into the key messages, our first big key message is that the rigorous work of the UNFCCC appointed experts should be recognized through the adaptation of the 100 proposed indicators that importantly include the 10 water and sanitation indicators. This is to ensure that all target components are tracked and enable holistic action. This is particularly because we argue that a more limited set of 20 to 50 indicators that not even are systematically chosen for their contribution will not deliver the holistic integrated response the world urgently needs when it comes to the adaptation towards climate change. The parties need to recognize the advanced and informed work of the UNFCCC experts, acknowledging that their expertise has brought the process as far as we've gotten to now, and within their mandate, and that the political process, given the limited time frame that we currently have and also see in the negotiation text, is unlikely to yield a more robust assessment. The water and sanitation indicators themselves need to be adopted in their entirety. The targets reflect the multiple aspects of climate-resilient water and sanitation, including water scarcity, water stress, climate-resilient water and sanitation services, and integrated management responses to climate hazards. Adopting only a few of these indicators would create severe gaps in tracking adaptation progress. The indicators agreed should be approached iteratively, directing action now while allowing for continuous refinement as new data, methods, and monitoring systems are developed to further refine, but to enable us to take action now. On the second key message, which is that the temperate water and sanitation indicators are instrumental for tracking progress and building climate resilience. Although some derive from existing SDG 6 metrics, their climate rationale emerges when they are interpreted through the lens of exposure and vulnerability to climate-related hazards. This is also recognized by the IPCC Assessment Report 6, which states that it's not possible to isolate the effects of climate change on water scarcity or quality from those of other human pressures. Therefore, the most effective way to assess climate resilience in the water management domain is to measure social and institutional aspects while also mapping the exposure to climate hazards. When these indicators are disaggregated spatially and temporarily to reflect climate risk, particularly when it comes to applying geographic areas that are identified through vulnerability analysis to highly exposed to climate change, the proposed indicators that are relating to water stress levels, as we see in 9A1, change in water use efficiency, like 9A2, and the proportion of bodies of water within good ambient water quality, 9A8, become adaptation indicators. The indicators proposed will also evolve as new data from vulnerability assessments, like with target 10A, and methodologies become available. Parties should therefore recognize the value of the current set of indicators and the foundation they build for immediate action. On the third indicator, which is that as recognized in the Article 18 of the UAE Framework for Global Climate Resilience, climate change impacts are often transboundary in nature and may involve complex cascading risks. The indicators are to be agreed on the DGA and should therefore reflect and reinforce this dimension. Indicator 9A4, which is particularly relevant for this, on the proportion of basin areas and cryosphere systems within climate adaptation plans, should be retained. Disaggregation at the transboundary level for these and related indicators is vital to capture regional climate impacts, including changes in water availability, water quality degradation, and increasing flood risk that transcend national boundaries. Existing monitoring efforts on the Deepwater Convention and on SDG Indicator 6.5.2 already provide valuable data and methodologies for tracking progress on transboundary cooperation. Building on the existing architecture can ensure coherence, avoid duplication, and accelerate process towards the GGA. On the fourth key message that we propose for this first session is to ensure that the UAE framework meets the objectives set out for the GGA. Parties need to facilitate strong integration across thematic and policy indicators supported by means of implementation perspectives spanning the entire framework. This means because water and sanitation indicators are already central to advancing thematic and policy targets, as we've seen in the analysis Tuve has shared formally, that 54% of the 90 indicators reference to the water and sanitation, or at least the targets 9A, and connect them directly to the other thematic areas. Indicators on water stress, such as with 9A1, water use efficiency 9A2, water quality 9A8, water management in national plans 9A10, and climate resilient water and sanitation services 9A5 and 9A6 provide measurable evidence of investment, inclusion, capacity building, technology transfer, and directly inform means of implementation indicators. Policy cycle indicators should be systematically disaggregated across all thematic targets and sectors to ensure inclusive and effective operationalization and implementation. The indicator set should also balance outcome level measures of resilience such as water stress, 9A1, water use efficiency, 9A2, water quality, 9A8, and population using climate resilience service 9A5 and 9A6 with process-oriented indicators like integrated water management that we see under 9A10. Enabling the tracking on progress on enabling factors and means of implementation across different time horizons. And lastly, when we look at the custodian agencies, we argue that the critical role of custodian agencies and thematic stakeholders should be recognized as essential and ensuring credibility for long-term sustainability and following the adaptation of the indicators. The custodian agency under the integrated SDG 6 monitoring initiative play an essential role in providing methodologies, data standards, and technical support measures to support member states as they monitor progress for water and sanitation indicators. International agencies are well placed to support the refinement and operationalization of the GGA indicators, including the development of normative definitions, data collections, compilation and analysis methods, as well as expanding existing datasets to fit the GGA targets. Thematic stakeholders from different levels and backgrounds facilitate actions informed by expertise from on the ground and different realities, and are essential for ensuring effective and inclusive action that is sustainable over time. And with these key messages, we're then looking to go forward into the next segment, and that will be our panel discussion. And we have a wide array of speakers that I happily welcome on stage and also pass on to our moderator, Ingrid. Please.
Thanks, Manu. Good morning, everybody. Actually, Manu, could you help me maybe with one more chair? Or Jose's got it. Good morning, everybody. As Manu mentioned, my name is Ingrid Timbo. I am the Deputy Executive Director at the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, AGWA. It's my first full day at COP this year, so I'm really excited to be here and really excited to see everybody in the room and hopefully online as well. So today's discussion is going to focus a little bit on the key messages, but we also have a really excellent group of panelists assembled from countries and also technical experts, UN custodian agencies, and also civil society representatives. And so we really want to hear their different... Did we... I'm okay. Okay. We really want to hear their different perspectives on kind of thinking about how we got at right now with the set of indicators that we have, and also how we're going to take this forward. So I'm going to invite all of our panelists now to come on stage. And yeah. Tom, Animesh. Hopefully, can we see everybody online? Can everybody be seen over here? Okay, great. Oh, perfect. We do have enough space. Excellent. So I'm actually going to start our conversation here with our colleague from Sri Lanka. Nishadi Ariagama is joining us from Sri Lanka, and she can kind of give a perspective from a country that is grappling with having to now take in all of these indicators, to report on them, to monitor them, etc. So Nishadi, as an island state with deeply interconnected vulnerabilities, how does Sri Lanka see the need for a robust and comprehensive set of adaptation indicators, balancing that with your ability to report and monitor everything? Does this current set of indicators meet your needs? And if not, what's missing or how could they be improved? Thank you.
Yep. Hello. Hope you can hear me. All right. Thank you, Ingrid. I actually wear two hats. I'm a party negotiator for Sri Lanka and also working as at the International Water Management Institute as a researcher and a deputy country manager for Sri Lanka. And thank you for that question. So for us in Sri Lanka, I think adaptation is the most important component, even beyond mitigation, because we are not an Annex 1 country, but we are subject to, as an island state, we are subject to high vulnerability to climate change. So even in our NDCs, adaptation plays a major role as a country. So coming to the indicators, actually indicators are extremely important for measuring how we reach towards adaptation targets. No two things about it. It's really important that we have a set of indicators to measure how countries reach towards targets for adaptation, especially considering the thematic targets of the GGA and also for the GST that's going to happen later. But having said that, the 10 indicators, I wouldn't dwell on whether Sri Lanka likes the indicators or not, but what I'll do is how easy or difficult it would be for us to report on these indicators. For example, 3 of them. Indicator 1, change in water stress levels over time. Indicator 2, change in water use efficiency over time. And also indicator number 8, proportion of bodies of water with good ambient water quality. They come straight from the SDGs, so they are SDG indicators. So it will be relatively easy for us to report on these indicators. Then there are 4 others which build on existing SDG indicators, while 3 of them are completely new, and even metadata does not exist for these indicators. So for us as a country, if we are to report on these, what needs to happen is that first of all the metadata needs to be developed, and there should be comprehensive guidance and training for country parties on collecting the data, on how to obtain these data sets, whether there should be global standards for data sets, and whether there can be country standards. And so one thing is how to obtain the data for each of these, and we need to put processes in place to obtain the data sets. So that's one thing. And the second thing is how to assess the indicators themselves. So here again, I see the need for training and guidance for parties to assess the indicators and actually be able to report on them. So I don't think that the indicators as they are quite ready for use at the moment, so there needs to be some more refinement as well as training and guidance for indicators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nishadi, and that's actually a really great segue. I want to come back to you on a couple of things, but because you were just ending on the kind of thinking around how do we actually implement these indicators, I do want to go next to our indicator experts to maybe talk a little bit about that process and their thinking over the last year. Because if you joined us at the Water Pavilion last year, it was kind of at the start of this journey, shall we say, to get to where we're at with the 100 indicators that we have now. And so I think it would be great to hear Tom Slaymaker from the WHO UNICEF Joint Monitoring Program talk a little bit about kind of the process for getting to those 10 indicators. And maybe, Tom, if you can, I know there was a real care that was taken to try and use as much as possible existing indicators so that it supports their monitoring, but also meets the needs of the GGA and is aligned. And so there was some need to create new indicators. And maybe you're thinking about how countries will go about actually getting the data that they need to be able to report and monitor those as well. And then we'll go to Animesh Kumar from UNDRR to talk about the process for some of the other indicators that he was involved in as well. Because while we are focusing a little bit on the 10 water indicators, we also, the key messages reflect the fact that there's a lot of cross-cutting elements, and we think that that's really important and needs to be maintained, and so will be really great to hear from Animesh as well. But Tom, if you could say a few words about the water indicators specifically. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So I don't want to go back into the whole process that we have previously discussed about, how did we go about, reconciling all of these competing demands to arrive at the indicators. I think what we're getting to now, and Nishadi was highlighting this, is we're getting into a discussion about not just what type of indicators do we need, but how do we go about implementing them, and what would it take. If you look at the list of indicators, you'll see that the experts in almost all cases have proposed building on something that already exists and then going further. So either adding some additional elements which will respond to the needs of adaptation, or some further disaggregation in order to get information available at the level that's required for decision making. And this applies not only to the water indicators but also to other indicators. And what that means is that in almost all cases there is work to do to figure out how to implement them. So this is what the parties wanted. They wanted more ambitious indicators to address the targets. So I thought it might be quite useful just to reflect a little bit. There's been some discussion about what might be the role of a custodian agency in supporting. And because many of the parties are new to monitoring adaptation, they're perhaps not familiar with the processes that have already been established for monitoring not just the SDGs and Sendai, but also the MDGs that came before. So there's a lot of experience that we can draw on. I'm just going to take one example, which is the WHO UNICEF JMP, which is responsible for global monitoring of drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene. So we were tasked with monitoring the MDGs. And then we were also requested to support the monitoring of the SDGs. And when they established the SDGs, they said, this is what we're asking you to do. Custodian agencies should help to elaborate the data standards. So this is what Nishadi was talking about. Exactly what is the definition? What are the units of measurement? How can you aggregate this information? Secondly, and this is really important, to build statistical capacity. Your role is to work with the governments to build their capacity to monitor this indicator. And then to compile the information, to verify the information that's coming through national data sources, and to produce internationally comparable estimates that can be used for global reporting. But most people only focus on that last bit. They don't see all of the work that goes in to collecting the national data that goes into the global reporting. So what does that look like? Let's take one example. At the start of the SDG period, the single biggest gap for drinking water was the lack of information on drinking water quality. You have a target that says safe drinking water. Very easy to say. What do we mean by safe drinking water? So the first thing you have to do is then to precisely define safe drinking water. Countries collect information on many, many, many parameters of drinking water quality, and we agreed to focus on 3: fecal contamination, arsenic, and fluoride. And then we developed technical guidance on how to collect that information. And we looked at the different data sources. So if you are a high-income country or an upper middle-income country, you might have data through administrative sources, you might have data through regulators. And that might be available for most of the population, if not all of the population. But if you are a lower middle or low-income country, then you're very unlikely to have information for the entire population. Most countries had data on the urban population or the population that used piped water, but nothing on rural and nothing on non-pipe schemes and private water supplies. So the question was, what do we do to collect information on the missing population? And this is really important for large parts of Africa, Asia, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. So we developed some guidance, we developed some modules that allowed for the inclusion of a low-cost approach to water quality testing as part of a household survey. This has now been done in around 80 countries worldwide. So what we do is we support national statistical offices to design their household surveys, to adapt the international guidance to fit with the local national monitoring protocols. And then we train the enumerators who are going to the field so they understand how to do these tests. And then we support with the data analysis and the reporting at the end of the day. Sri Lanka is a really nice example. We supported Sri Lanka, I think, in 2017. There we had data from the National Water Supply Drainage Board. It was only available for urban, and it was only available for the formal public supplies. So they wanted to know, how do we get information on rural, and how do we get information on non-piped? So it was a long process, but eventually we had nationally representative data for Sri Lanka, which is what they really wanted. So this is the kind of work that goes in to supporting countries to report on indicators that they're not currently able to report on in order to be able to do the global reporting. I think at the start of the SDG period, we had national estimates for safe drinking water for 95 countries. We produced a report this year, our latest update, and it had estimates for 160 countries. So you can see the increase in the number of countries that are able to report on the indicator.
So that was over the last 10 years, is that correct?
That is a long process. It's a continuous process, and we have to understand that we are going to be embarking on a very similar process for the GGA. We are already developing the guidance to help us to understand how we can measure the new indicators that have been proposed. We've had public consultations. We have a technical working group. Some members are in the room who have been trying to figure out what is going to be new and different about these indicators and how can they be implemented. But we will be starting to test them in early 2026, and then I can imagine we will be following a similar process over the next 5 years and the next 10 years and trying to work towards a situation in which almost all countries who want to report on them are able to report on them. So that's what I wanted to say. Back to you.
No, thank you, Tom. And I think it really highlights the huge amount of work that it's going to take, regardless of the actual number of indicators that we get to in the end. It's going to be a massive amount of work. However, there are support systems that exist to support it. It also highlights the very important role of funding and finance for this work, because it's not free either. And so that's, I think, what a lot of our in particular low and middle income countries are really advocating for in terms of the types of indicators that they want to see. I want to give Animesh the opportunity to reflect maybe, and it was really nice, thanks Tom for kind of talking about how the process went with the SDGs. I think Animesh can also share how that process worked under Sendai as well, potentially, but also kind of in thinking about the DRR indicators as well, how that process worked maybe similarly to water or not, and how you see getting to implementation.
Thanks, Ingrid, and I would just take off from where Tom left, because he has already summarized things very well. I will just perhaps start by taking a step back, because sometimes we start, when we are very deep into a process, we start missing the forest while looking for the trees. Let's go back. I mean, why are we developing the indicators? I think for me there are three key rationales. One, we are turning an aspiration set by the Paris Agreement, which was the global goal on adaptation, and the direction given to us by the Dubai COP through the 11 targets into measurable, actionable, accountable indicators. That's very important to keep at the back of the mind, because it's not just not about indicators, just not a technical process. We are serious about the aspiration that the Paris Agreement has set in. And if we are accountable towards that aspiration, we need to have accountable measures to do so. And that's what the indicator does. The second thing is we need to quantify what we are doing. We need to quantify the outcomes. Otherwise, we can just go in an open-ended process without knowing, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the wrong thing? How can we turn back? What is the course correction? If we don't have the right indicators, right matrix in place, we cannot do that. It also means we cannot do very good global stock takes of the Paris Agreement if we don't have the right indicators. And the third thing for me is the finance. If we are able to understand the direction of the travel in a measurable way, being the course correction, we can justify more finance rather than just asking for finance in an open-ended way again. So that's why indicators are just not a technical process, and that's why it's also important to do it rather than waiting for another 2 years to adopt the indicators and start moving forward towards it. I would say where we are as of now, and I'm now starting to draw some institutional memory that we have over the last 10 years, because we went under the Sendai framework and the SDGs exactly the same process 10 years ago. We made mistakes, and we don't want the GGA process to make the same mistakes. What we need to do as of now is moving more towards looking towards the implementation, the operationalization of these indicators. For me, there are two key things that need to be done. The first thing is the data readiness of the indicators, and the second thing is the data readiness of the countries. When we talk about the data readiness of the indicators, we have been talking about like the taxonomy. How do you define clean water? How do you define early warning systems? Do we have the right metadata in place? Do we have the right data standards in place? Do we have the right statistical methodologies in place? It is methodologies, but it is not like others don't have it. So we do have some level of methodologies and metadata already available, and countries are using them. But some work will need to be done to be able to make them more adaptation specific and so on. So that's the first part in terms of ensuring that the data readiness of the indicators is done. The second part is data readiness of the countries. And this brings us to the question of the capacity. Do the countries have the capacity to report on them? For us, we did an analysis in 2016, 2017, 10 years ago, to understand the data readiness of the indicators. So for each of the 38 indicators of the Sendai framework, we asked the countries, do you have this data? Do you have the accessibility? Can you access this data? What is the quality of the data? Can you use that data for meaningful information? And the countries, 87 countries responded to these 4 questions for each of the 38 indicators. 10 years down the line, I can tell you, we have as of now 171 countries that are reporting on the Sendai framework. The indicators for which the countries said in 2015 that they are not ready are the least reported indicators 10 years down the line as of now. So just to give an example, for indicators on human cost of disasters, mortality, morbidity, we have 150 countries reporting on an average. For the country indicators on cultural heritage, indicators on infrastructure service disruption, including water, we have 40 to 60 countries reporting. It goes on to show that where countries said we are not ready, it has taken 10 years and they are still not ready. A sizable cohort of countries are not ready. And that brings us to the final point, which is the fundamental thing which we had at the back of the mind as experts while developing the indicators was the reporting burden of the countries. It's very good to have very ambitious indicators, but the indicators remain indicators if they don't have data behind them. If the countries do not have the capacity, they will not report. And hence it's very important to also be realistic that Yes, ambitious, good, but a pinch of realism. Can we build upon what exists? Can we build upon what the countries are reporting on? And that brings us to the point on the role of custodian organizations. Each of the 7 thematic targets of the global goal of the UAE framework is one ministry of a country. Water ministry, agriculture ministry, health ministry, infrastructure, construction, cultural ministry. These are the ones who will be reporting on these indicators. Have we discussed with these ministries that this is coming to you and you'll have to report? I don't think that in-country process has happened. The countries may not be ready, and hence we'll need to go ahead and ensure that yes, we have something in place, but the refinement of the indicators takes a long time. We are still working on the refinement of SDG indicators. So it takes a lot of time, but let not perfection be the enemy of the good. This is the principle with which we should be working as of now. I will end by a slightly positive note. I'm sure before coming to the COP, all of us have read the NDC synthesis report. Of all the countries that submitted the NDCs this time, 62% of them have used adaptation indicators while covering adaptation section of their NDCs. And these indicators are either coming from the list we have compiled, which is in the public domain, or the list that they may have developed, like Vietnam has done it in their own country, a good list of countries, indicators, or the indicators they're already using in one way or the other, which shows that there is an appetite. If 2/3 of the countries are using some level of matrix, there is an appetite, they will be using it. So let's not, I would strongly recommend all of us, let's good sense prevail. We will never be able to have the perfect indicator. If we do that, another 10 years, we'll still be talking the same thing. So let's go ahead with which is good enough to inform decision making and continue to refine the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Animesh. And I totally agree with you with the optimism. I think countries, and when you speak with them, they are all very keen to have a good set of indicators, and they are very keen to include adaptation, especially in them, for the most part. The issue then is the monitoring, it's the reporting, it's the readiness, and this is something Nishadi and I were just chatting about kind of beforehand as well, the difficulty that this was happening in a parallel process, right? And so countries are creating their new NDCs at the same time as the GGA indicators are being developed, so it was very challenging to include them specifically, but there are still indications that a lot of the countries are thinking about it and thinking about it in their particular contexts as well. You also mentioned something, I think, too, that's really important. When we're talking about adaptation and resilience, we're talking about kind of entire systems, which are very complex. It's not just the water sector, it's not just the health sector. These are all integrated and interrelated, and that makes reporting and monitoring even more potentially complicated. And so it's something that I know has been grappled with and is continuing to be grappled with. And on that note, I want to turn to Sonia Koppel, ECE, who works a lot on transboundary water issues, and we know that was has been included in the water as a consideration under the water indicators. And I would be curious to get your reflection, Sonia, on kind of, do you see what exists there as adequate, and how can UNECE and others support countries as they think about monitoring and reporting specifically on transboundary related issues? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Indeed, having been myself yesterday in the negotiation on the DGA, we have seen that it's complicated, but still there is an overall appetite to move forward. And with regards to transboundary, indeed, as it has been mentioned before, there are 1 or 2 or 3 skeptical countries, but still many also in favor, because, as we all know, more than 60% of freshwater resources worldwide are shared between 2 or more countries. And actually, as it was stressed by Senegal, Uganda, and also others in the side event yesterday, transboundary cooperation adaptation really can make adaptation more effective and efficient by pooling resources, by bringing it together, by sharing data, by possibly even locating measures in a basin where they may have an optimum effect, which may be upstream of flood protection infrastructure or others, and by sharing costs even. And there is a study by the Adaptation Fund, which has implemented a few transboundary projects, for example, Lake Victoria Basin, the Dwin Basin, in Volta Basin, and they have really proven that through these projects, costs were saved because certain things could be done at the basin level and not only at the national or local level. So this is why we were happy to see that in the UAE framework text, in the transboundary cooperation was mentioned, and that's why we also believe it's important to have an indicator about it. As mentioned at the beginning, transboundary considerations are now considered somehow, at least in the draft, we think it's important that this stays or is even further reinforced. And this is also because actually data exists. As many of you know, there is a specific indicator among the SDG 6 indicators on 6.5.2 on transboundary cooperation, for which we, UNICE, are co-custodian agency together with UNESCO. And if I think back to 2017, it was similar at that moment that also countries were not sure whether such indicator would be useful or not. But by now, after a few years, we have a more than 90% response rate. In the first cycle, we had 107 replies out of the 153 countries sharing transboundary waters. Now we have, if you look back at the 3 cycles, 143 countries have submitted data, including some of those skeptical countries on transboundary cooperation. And in addition, many of them are actually highlighting the benefits of reporting. So Switzerland has identified new aquifers through their reporting. Senegal has identified that while they are often considered as a champion on transboundary cooperation, they did not have cooperation on a shared aquifer, which delivers drinking water to Dakar and others. So they started to cooperate with neighboring countries on the so-called Senegal-Mauritanian aquifer basin. And there are other such examples where really the reporting has led to concrete actions on water, and particularly on some of the less advanced areas such as groundwater. In addition, we have not only an existing indicator where many countries already report on, but also specific data on climate change. So the template which the countries are asked to fill out every 3 years, next time will be early next year, includes several questions related to climate change adaptation. So, for example, the template asks if the country have an early warning system in place at transboundary level, or if they have a drought risk reduction strategy or flood risk reduction strategy. And in the last report, which we published a year ago, we had a specific focus on climate change, as you could see on the last slide. And this has shown that, for example, the cooperation on flooding is quite advanced. More than 60% of basins worldwide have flood risk reduction strategies or have early warning systems for floods and so on. But it's much less for drought, or only around 30%. And if we look at climate change adaptation strategies more broadly, only 14% of transboundary basins worldwide so far have a transboundary adaptation strategy. And the report, you can see some more details here in this regard. With regards to broader, 20% of disaster risk reduction plans, so it's a bit better, but still not so great. So we have data available which the countries have reported and which can be used in the GDA going forward. And also here, indeed, we as co-custodian agency, UNESCO, UNICE, we stand ready to further support countries. And just a month ago, we had maybe another point. I think what is also important is that we look at, indeed, how to reduce the reporting burden for countries. And this is why, in our case, it was decided to combine reporting under the Water Convention, which I'm representing, so the Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes. Basically, the parties are asked to fill out one template, which is the same template as the reporting on 652. So not to reduce the reporting burden for country, they just have to fill out one template. And at the same time, we do recognize that maybe the reporting template could still include some additional elements related to climate. So it was decided that our task force on water and climate, which we have under the Water Convention, will look into how the reporting template could be further revised in the future to add even more climate-related questions. So finally, just to conclude, I think we can take into account all those lessons mentioned earlier on already also by Tom and others. For example, under UN Water, we have also the Integrated Monitoring Initiative, which to me is also maybe a last lesson learned from the SDG 6 reporting, that the co-custodian agencies also need to work together under a common framework and support countries indeed through capacity building, through training, through methodology, through metadata, and it's an iterative process. Like we had after the first reporting cycle, we had a meeting with the countries concerned and did some changes in the reporting template. So let's consider some of those lessons going forward, and hopefully indeed transparency cooperation can be included in the GTA indicator.
Thanks for that, Sonia, and thanks for including some kind of tangible lessons learned as well. So we've heard from some of the custodian agencies and the technical experts. We've heard from countries, and there's been some conversation about kind of the need for, let's say, comprehensive or universal definitions for some of the things that are covered under the GGA. I know, for example, climate resilient water and sanitation is one of them. And so Jose, you're going to talk about a few different things, but maybe could you first reflect a little bit on kind of how SWA and others from the water, from the WASH sector specifically, are supporting countries in coming up with these definitions. I know you've been very involved in that. Sorry, I didn't introduce you properly. Jose Hesse from Sanitation and Water for All.
No, thank you, Ingrid, and thanks. I completely agree to, as it could be otherwise, most of the things that have been explained here. Water and sanitation stakeholders have been working, obviously, on water and sanitation for many decades, and adaptation is not new to us. We didn't have to wait for work programs launched by COPs to understand that adaptation is essential for us, for our services, for the resilience of the communities, for the resilience of the ecosystems, the resilience of economy. So indeed, what we are willing to do, I think, and what we are hearing here is that we are willing to chip in these formal processes with our expertise, because again, we are not new to adaptation. Since the adoption of the Global Resilience Framework, we are a partnership of more than 500 partners. So we've been trying to socialize this framework and what the new targets mean for water and sanitation. And the responses or the questions that we are getting from the implementers on the ground is that they need a better understanding of what does it mean climate resilient water or climate resilient sanitation. Again, these are stakeholders that have been working on these issues for decades. So the questions to us are, what do we need to do differently if we are to build climate resilient water supply or sanitation? Sanitation and Water for All, we have a climate task team with more than 50 organizations, and we took this very seriously, because since the beginning, when the target was agreed, we put in place a long consultation with a lot of stakeholders to come to an agreement as to what do we all collectively mean by climate resilient water supply or sanitation. It's okay. So yeah, it's been here at COP30 that we have launched a definition. This definition has been also instrumental to the monitoring efforts to come up with indicators. And we are proudly being part of the ongoing efforts to develop climate resilient indicators for water and sanitation. Not only that, because our next push in Sanitation and Water for All is that we want to see the global framework made reality on the ground as soon as possible. So in addition to working with definitions and common understanding among stakeholders as to what do we mean with climate resilient this or that, we have also gone one step beyond, which is developing implementation pathways and many of options that countries, after conducting risk assessments, can see many of options on the things that could be done at the national level, at transboundary level, subnational level, and local level. So we would like to accelerate this process of making a global target a reality on the ground, and that's because we've been working on that. In addition to that, and again, this is to confirm that water and sanitation stakeholders have been already working with the integration of adaptation and with monitoring systems to understand the contributions of basic services such as water and sanitation to the broader community resilience. We've even gone into efforts like this, and I would like to take this opportunity to launch this report on behalf of the University of Technology Sydney, on behalf of UNICEF and the Global Water Partnership, and with thanks to the Government of Australia for providing core support to this. Sanitation and Water for All, these are all partners of Sanitation and Water for All, and we've been part of the reference group in creating this guidance. This is an attempt and a research to monitor how water and sanitation, basic services, right, contribute to broader community resilience. And this is very opportune for this session. This is very opportune for the work that is going on right now on developing indicators, because it confirms many of the things that we've been discussing here. This guidance note confirmed one of the things that we have discussed. There is a strong appetite by water and sanitation stakeholders to understand better climate resilience and to understand better the outcomes and how the provision of basic services that become resilient are an essential precondition for climate resilient communities. But it's also, what we have discussed here, it's impossible to understand in vacuum how one basic service contributes to the broader community resilience, because this guidance notes gives also testimony on that is the systemic change that is needed, is the contributions of water and sanitation to broader food security, to broader health security, and it's the sum of all these efforts that produce a systemic change and lead to the resilient communities, but also resilient ecosystems and resilient economies. I would like to encourage all of you to use this guidance note to give us feedback, and we are willing to use your feedback once you use this for implementation on the ground, and to work with the feedback that you give us.
Thank you so much, Jose. So talking about different systems where all of this is integrated into, you mentioned health, and you also mentioned food systems as well. And so I want to go to our last panelist here, Israel Rodriguez, who's a regional program coordinator from Action Against Hunger, and maybe get your institutional thoughts on the GGA indicators thus far, the process, and how it is really actually fundamental to the work that you are doing at Action Against Hunger.
Okay, thank you so much for this invitation. From the CSO point of view, I'm here to talk on behalf of also Climate Action Network, the CAN. So I have some points, some mentions on specific indicators. I would like to take this opportunity also to talk about that. So we welcome the message, we welcome the indicators, and we have some also important areas where they can be strengthening to better reflect people's real experience and needs. So the first one, I would like to talk about water stress, the first indicator. So we support systematic water results monitoring as part of the prevent, adapt, and mitigate approach. But the current water stress ratio doesn't show how families actually experience scarcity. For example, people face interruptions, poor water quality, and unequal access. So not just biophysical numbers. So this indicator needs to reflect social and environmental realities, not only sectoral or economic ones. The second one about water use efficiency. Today's efficiency metrics favor high-value economic sectors and ignores social and environmental benefits. Efficiency shouldn't be only economic. Metered consumption and self-continuity tell us much more about real sustainable access for people. Regarding climate-resilient water infrastructure, we fully support indicators tracking how much water infrastructure is built or upgraded to withstand climate hazards. For example, against hunger, Action Against Hunger, my organization, we promote flood-proof standards and renewable energy integration, which are key for long-term resilience. Also, regarding the indicators on integrated water resource management plans, we believe that it's not enough for a basin or aquifer to have a plan, but plans must be co-designed with local communities and include clear, measurable milestones. For us, that is what makes them actionable. Regarding relocation linked to water-related hazards, this indicator should be more ambitious, in our opinion. Relocation shouldn't be only a reaction to disasters. We need to prevention and anticipation to reduce impacts before people are forced to move. And when relocation happens, it must be safe, voluntary, and dignified. This is really important for us. Integration into national adaptation plans and NEAPs. Yeah, we support tracking how countries integrate water and wash into national adaptation plans, but the link should go both ways. Adaptation measures should also feed back into water and sanitation strategies. That is for us very important, this alignment, so it's essential. Just to finish these topics, and finally, no one of these will be possible without public funds. So we can have the best indicators in the world, but without a real investment, they cannot be implemented. So thank you.
Thank you, Israel. And I want to say we are going to open. We can go a little bit longer because we started late, and so I will open the floor to questions in a moment. So get your questions ready. But something that you raised, Israel, there, I want to come back to the technical experts as well, because there's an element of that we haven't really and that is the dimensional targets. And I think a lot of what you're talking about would fall under particular 10A and 10B, so on impact, vulnerability, and risk assessment, and on planning as well. That incorporates a lot of the things that you're talking about. Tom and/or Animesh, do you want to reflect on kind of how you thought about these linkages between the thematic targets and also the dimensional targets, because they're massively interconnected, but I think we're still thinking, at least some of us are still thinking about them in these kind of technical silos. But maybe, Tom, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Can you hear me? Yes. So we did discuss this, and one of the things that was very difficult, I think, for the experts was trying to reduce from this very, very long list to a list of no more than 100. And the only way in which that was possible was to make very explicit linkages between the thematic targets, the indicators under the thematic targets, and the indicators under the dimensional targets. In other words, if you are removing something from the thematic targets, it needs to appear in the dimensional targets, otherwise it will be lost. And so you'll see that in a number of ways. You'll see that in some cases the indicators for the dimensional targets are covering a range of different things, including water. So risk and vulnerability assessment is a very good example. 10A there is a requirement for risk and vulnerability assessment and to have multi-hazard warning systems, and one of those hazards is water. So we said it's covered there, therefore we don't need, under all of the thematic targets, a reference to hazard warning. Another example that we mentioned yesterday in the side event that we did on transboundary was that you will find references under the infrastructure and human settlements target to transboundary infrastructure. Now, transboundary infrastructure would include waterways which are transboundary. And so we have to remember that what we have under the thematic target for water and sanitation is part of a package of indicators which will only work if they are taken together and implemented together. And the ministries in a government and also the agencies that are responsible for collecting the data to report on these indicators will not necessarily be organized according to the GGA concept of themes and dimensions. So in each country, it will look a little bit different. And so that's, I think, what Animesh was really emphasizing. There needs to be a conversation. Where will this data come from? In some cases, there will be a part of government which will be providing some of water, some of health, and some of Para 10. And then another part which will be covering other parts of Para 10 and some of the other thematic targets. And that will depend on institutional arrangements, and it will depend on the particular approach in which countries collect data and the maturity of national data systems and the extent to which they rely on population-based data, regulatory data, Earth observation, and other data sources. And this is a really important conversation which has to be part of the metadata development and implementation that we are still only just moving into. Thanks.
Animesh, do you want to build on that? Yeah.
Does this work? Yes, this works. Yeah, just to add further, I mean, a couple of points. When we go from 10,000 indicators to 100 indicators, often people think, how was that process followed? Was it selection of picking up 100 out of this 10,000? So very easy. No, this was not how we did it. We actually went to a clean slate and broke down each of the target into logical components. And those logical components are listed in the workshop report, the report that went into the subsidiary body meetings in June. So just imagine, just back the envelope, 11 targets on an average, each target having 3 components, each component having 3 indicators. 11 into 3 into 3 is 99 indicators. We have still one more to go. So that's how very logically we managed to reach a test set of 100 indicators. And hence, in our average, you will see that we have around 10 indicators, 9 to 10 indicators per target. While doing so, one of the key things, and this is what Tom has very well articulated, is that we really wanted to ensure that the interlinkages between targets does not mean more indicators, but less indicators. We already gave example of early warning system. Health, water, agriculture, infrastructure, each of them could have an early warning system. Or we do have 10A, which has early warning system, and each of these thematic indicators becomes a disaggregation. So the mantra by which we try to move from many indicators to less was disaggregation. So many of these indicators have the disaggregation by which the information will not be lost. This not only means ensuring that many of the thematic components will be hidden under disaggregation of the process indicators, but also socioeconomic variables, sex, age, disability. All of these are also under, if there is a human element of an indicator, there is a socioeconomic disaggregation associated with it. I would also point to one specific column of our very close to the heart Excel sheet that has been submitted. There's one column which lists which are the indicators this indicator corresponds to or is relevant to. It again shows the interlinkages. Having gone through this whole process, if we have not followed a cutting down approach from 10,000 to 100, going from 100 to no matter what number is adopted in this COP also needs to be a logical process. It cannot be a selection of 10, 15, 30 or 50 indicators out of those 100. Because if we do that, we completely lose that meaningfulness. You remove one indicator, you might be affecting all the targets because there are disaggregations for many of the indicators within that. And that's a caution that we keep raising with the parties, that please let it be a logical process, because cutting down with a machete sounds very easy, but that's not the right way of adopting indicators.
Thank you, Animesh. So I'm going to open the floor if there are any questions from the audience, and maybe Manu, you can help with microphones. But if anybody would like to ask a question, also the panelists are welcome to ask questions. But I want to go to the audience first.
Hello, you hear me? Jean-Luc Rodeau, French Water Partnership. I should wonder if you are optimist or not with the adoption of the set of indicators in this scope. Because I've heard that some countries say they are not ready. Others say they want to have a connection with the financing of the global goal on adoption. So, should it be possible to think that there should be an adoption of a section of indication, for example, on water? Or a lot of these indicators are the same as the Sustainable Development Goals. So we could say we have the same. So these indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals should be the indicators of this set. So are you optimist or not?
The hot question up first. Who wants to take that one? So the question was if you're optimistic at all about the package of indicators being adopted at this COP, and if you think that it might actually be cut down to Animesh, to the point that you were just making, potentially a selection of the indicators instead, which you're potentially, I think, advising against. But would anybody like to jump in first?
Well, I'm sure that we can team up to answer this, but optimism, yes, but the first draft text of the resolution that now includes many of options, unfortunately, starts with 4, 5, 6 paragraphs that are all very negative in regards to the work that the experts have been doing over the last year and a half. So, from a water and sanitation point of view and from a thematic point of view, we are at first disappointed with the first iteration of the text, as it completely disregards and undermines, if I am allowed to say, that's the interpretation, through a set of multiple negative paragraphs. Even in the negotiation room, it has been brought to the attention that they cannot do that. They cannot make a resolution that starts with all these negative sentences. Now, said that, and because parties have raised this issue as a concern among themselves, we are positive that some parties and groups are advocating for the adoption of the full list of indicators as developed by the technical experts. Now, it is true that right now in the draft text, there are options that call for just simply grabbing these 100 indicators and refer to them as a technical paper that countries could or could not use. So at the moment, in the first iterations of the negotiators, we see that everything is possible. Now, as thematic experts, I think that we are optimistic that potentially a large number of indicators could be adopted. Now, there are parties also advocating for a smaller subset of them to be adopted, like among 20 or 25, based on data readiness, etc. So, from my side, I'm optimistic, but the negotiations at the moment in the negotiation room are hard.
Yeah. I miss not to go back to Nishadi on this question, because I think from your perspective, what are some of the challenges of adopting that you see or that countries have raised in the negotiations of adopting the package as it exists? Maybe it would be nice for the colleagues to hear, from your perspective of what you see those challenges are, because you've had this chance to sit here and listen to all of the technical experts, but from your perspective, what are the challenges?
Thanks for your question, and coming straight from the negotiating rooms, I know the text has all those at the moment, but something I can say is that the work of experts has been recognized, has been appreciated by all parties in the negotiating rooms, although the text does start with something negative at the moment. So that work is appreciated, recognized, no two things about it. And I can't speak for other parties, but as Sri Lanka, what I can see is this: the pushback is also because of some of the reasons that I raised earlier, because of the enormity of the task, the complexity of the task, and some countries feel that if this is adopted, they would be bound to report from next year. And how do you go about this? And there would not be any room for adjustment, refinement, etc. So these are some of the sentiments that are there. So I can't say whether it will be adopted or not, but these are some of the reasons for all the sentiments that have been expressed. Yes.
No, that's helpful, and I was going to come to Tom anyways, because this was something that he raised in when we were thinking about the SDG process and how it's taken 10 years, right, to get to kind of the level of reporting and monitoring that we would like to see on that. And so if you have thoughts and reflections on kind of, does everybody have to have everything right away, or how will the process evolve? Yeah.
Yes, I think it's important to remember that the targets are political. Okay, they have been set by the parties, and they're very ambitious. And so the role of the experts was then to say, what is, a minimum set of indicators which would correspond with the ambition of the targets. So what it means to reduce the number of indicators is to make a decision to not monitor something which is part of the targets. There's some very nice analysis that's been done by IPAM and others, which says if you take this one away, then you're not really measuring this target. And so if parties want to do that, they need to make a conscious decision not to do something which has been agreed at the political level. However, the reality is, as we know, is that it is a very ambitious agenda, and capacity is limited, and there are very real concerns about the burden of reporting, and we have to take that seriously. So to adopt the package, I think the parties need also to have some reassurance that there will also be some support in order to build the capacity that is required to be able to monitor them in the long term. And that's really, really important. One thing I would say, though, is that there is a danger always to try and reduce everything back to what is already being done. And I think the danger with that is that you would then focus on the easiest things, and you would park the hardest things and say we'll do those later. If we don't have agreement now to address those really difficult aspects of adaptation, they will never get addressed. So it's very high risk to say we will just take 20 indicators. If it's possible to say we start with the ones which are easy and we report on those, maybe by the next GST, and then we identify another group which are a bit harder, and we identify a process to report on those later, then I think we could see a roadmap to addressing the full ambition of the GGA at a later date. There was something very similar to this with the SDGs. The initial set of indicators was divided into tiers, those that already have both a methodology and a data widely available, those that have a methodology but they have not been collected very widely, and those where we don't even have agreement on how to measure them. So that third category, there was a mechanism set up which said we are going to look at this third category on a regular basis, and we're going to say, are we making progress on tier 3? And in the first 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the parties said, show me the progress on tier 3. And after 3 or 5 years, if you're not making progress, then they started to say, okay, we don't think this is feasible, maybe we drop it, maybe we replace it with something else. And that is a very reasonable approach. And so I could imagine that we might have something similar for the GGA.
Yeah.
But it is not reducing the commitment of the targets by arbitrarily reducing the number of indicators.
I want to link that, and I want Animesh, you come in too, but I think there's a really important point there on the indicators that we already have information on. But we probably, not in all cases, but in many cases already have funding and financing for those, but we don't have funding and financing for the harder ones and the things that we aren't monitoring already. And so if we are to get that, they have to be included. If we just don't include them, then countries aren't going to be able to actually do the work that is needed as well. So I think that's another really important linkage to make. Animesh, did you want to say something else as well?
Yeah, just to add further, I mean, there is this, we have carefully read through all the guidelines that have been given from the decision of the COP from Baku, from the subsidiary body meetings in June. The reason why the Excel sheet is a voluminous, huge Excel sheet is because each column is a guideline, and we have provided information on how that guideline was followed. Now, having said that, we will also need to understand that how the political processes happen. So we will keep us outside that political process. We are experts, technical people, and even more than that, I'm a UN civil servant like Tom. So we will be even more conservative in what we say. But if you read the guidelines, for example, there is one from Baku which says that lack of data for an indicator should not be the reason for dropping an indicator. Now we are being told that because indicators don't have enough data, let's drop them. So it's a bit counterintuitive in terms of the guidelines that have been given and the guidelines that have been followed. But having said that, let's have a pragmatic approach. That's what I think we need to head towards. I think an iterative approach, starting with a pilot report based on what we already have, which are adaptation relevant for a kind of a first report. Look at the SDG report of 2016 and look at the SDG report of 2025. They're very different because in 2025 we had much better data than in 2016. But we did have a 2016 report on SDGs. And we did say something. We did say, provided a baseline of where the world is on SDGs. Can we do that for adaptation? I think we can with the information we already have. So from our side, given the experience from SDGs and Sendai and so on, it has to be an iterative approach. It will be a learning process and we will learn as we go. But let's not create a vacuum of knowledge simply because we have not reached a perfect stage, because that perfection will never happen. I will just add one more trivia here. Let's look at other intergovernmental frameworks. How many indicators do they have? SDGs, 169 targets, 230 indicators, 1.3 indicator per target. Sendai framework, 38 indicators, 7 targets, 5.4 indicator per target. Here we have 10 indicators per target. But all three have been logical processes. It does not matter what is the number of indicator per target. If we go back to pre-Baku discussions, the number we were working was around 55. There could be a possibility that 45 indicators are dropped from the current list and 55 are adopted. But this 55 will not be the same as that 55 that we would have developed had we been given number 55. So when we talk about cutting down indicators and adopting only a few based on certain considerations, I will reiterate that let that be a very, very logical process, because we will not be doing good to some elements of some targets if it's just dropped arbitrarily.
Thanks, Animesh. So we thank all the panelists for staying a little bit extra. I know we started late, and I will wrap it up here, I think, in the interest of time. But I just want to say, the thing that I'm taking away from this discussion is that I still feel so much positivity and goodwill from the countries who gave the very ambitious mandate in the UAE framework from all the technical experts who did a heroic work to get to the list of 100 indicators, to the custodian agencies who are responding to those indicators and saying, here's what we have existing, here's where we will need to fill in the gaps, and also from the civil society organizations that are coming up with standard definitions that are providing guidance for the countries and stand ready to support them as they start the implementation process. And so I think this is a good example today of kind of how everyone is really trying to work together and be really supportive of coming up with a robust set of GGA indicators. And so I just want to thank all of the panelists for all of they've been working so hard on this, and there's still a lot of work to do, right? There's no right, and I want to wish the parties the best of luck with the negotiations, and I know it's a really challenging process, and I do wish you the best of luck over the next week, and the sympathy for the lack of sleep and all of those things. I hope you can get some good meals in there at some point. But yeah, with that, I will wrap up this session and just say thanks again, particularly to UA and also to CWE and WaterAid for their strong support of all of the work on GGA. And we will have our next session on GGA starts at 3 p.m., I think this afternoon, so please come back for that. Thank you so much.